Japanese horror is without a doubt one of the scariest subgenres of horror in all forms of media. Movies, anime, and yes, even video games. However, the term J-horror actually applies to all Japanese developed and or published forms of media, meaning in reality, Resident Evil technically qualifies as a J-horror game. But on the third day of the 31 Days of Halloween, I want to focus on a specific little niche within the subgenre. Yeah, today we're actually taking a look at the best J-horror games set in Japan. You know, real, terrifying J-horror video games. The only rules to this list is that 1, it has to be set in Japan, and 2, it has to be a horror game, obviously. Before we get started though, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel for more survival horror content, especially if you want to keep up to date with the 31 Days of Halloween, in which I post a new horror game ranking video every single day in the month of October. Also, hit that like button if you enjoyed today's topic. Anyway, my name is Ruben with Nerdspace Games, and this is my top 7 best J-horror games of all time. Let's get it. Number 7, Ikai. What do you get when you combine PT with Japanese folklore? Well, you get Ikai. Set in the feudal era of Japan, Ikai follows a young priestess of a shrine who must defeat dark spirits by facing them head on. Like many psychological horror games inspired by PT, Ikai doesn't give you your traditional weapons to defend yourself. The mechanics of the game are meant to make you feel defenseless and hopeless against the terrifying spirits that you come across. The spirits of the game are inspired by the yokai of Japanese folktales, and each one presents a different challenge. Gameplay wise, it's nothing to write home about, as it's a horror walking simulator like some of the other J-horror games we'll come across later on today's list. However, where games like Ikai really shine are the atmospheres and the set pieces that creates a terrifying yet immersive experience for the player. Number 6, Chilla's Art. So while I have played a few of these games before, I figured I should have an expert in this franchise talk a little more about Chilla's Art. So Conjure Lion, take it away.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Conjure Lion and welcome back to a brand new Nerdspace Games YouTube video. I hope you guys are having an amazing day so far. I want to thank Nerdspace Games for having me here. So number 6, we actually have the Chilla's Art series. This series holds a chilling space in my heart. They're scary, atmospheric, bite-sized masterpieces, with each game pulling me into the chilling world inspired by Japanese folklore, fears, urban legends, and making the experience uniquely immersive every single time. Not to mention, the visual style of this series adds to the aesthetic with its retro PlayStation 1 VHS graphics. The sound design can be absolutely terrifying, with it being completely quiet at times except for the player's footsteps, leaving me on the edge the entire time, which can be absolutely terrifying at night playing this game alone, anticipating for the very next jump scare. This game is also an anthology series, so you don't necessarily have to play a game to get into it. They all have like their own unique stories. The storytelling is actually also great, with my favorite being The Closing Shift, which is a story about a barista being stalked in a coffee shop at night. Every game is a new, unnerving journey, and I cannot wait for more, and this is why it's one of my favorite horror series of all time. But I want you guys to have an amazing day. Thank you guys so much for having me. Stay safe out there, and peace.
Number 5, Kuon. Before the name FromSoft was famous for creating the Soulsborne subgenre, they were developing all kinds of games, including a Japanese survival horror game called Kuon. This PS2 classic was heavily inspired by Resident Evil in many ways. Limited resources, tank controls, backtracking on a map with plenty of locked doors that you need keys to eventually come back to and unlock them. And Kuon even featured 2 playable protagonists with 2 unique stories. Well, 3 technically, but the 3rd scenario is unlocked after completing the first 2. Kuon featured terrifying creatures with some body horror that would actually match even some of the Silent Hill monsters. It also had this horrifying and eerie soundtrack throughout the game, with most tracks having these creepy kids singing in the background. The gameplay, while clunky, was also somewhat unique, as it swapped bullets and guns for spells and melee weapons. The atmosphere and environments of this game are easily some of the best parts, as this Japanese horror game creates a very immersive experience that'll leave you shaking in your boots long after the credits roll. All in all, Kuon is a terrifying J-horror game, and it's honestly one of the most underrated survival horror games out there. Number 4, Corpse Party. Corpse Party is honestly one of my favorite guilty pleasures of all time. It's not a masterpiece to any degree, but the 2021 remake of Corpse Party has a special place in my heart, mainly for the amount of chills it gave me throughout its extremely disturbing and dark story. The game follows a group of friends that find themselves trapped inside of a ghost school in some sort of alternate reality when they incorrectly perform a friendship ritual. Most of the gameplay is like a visual novel, but the most interesting aspect of Corpse Party is the sheer amount of terror in the game that comes from the ghosts and the atmosphere. While on paper it might not seem like a game that'll keep you up at night, this ghost story that's full of twists and turns will ultimately leave you speechless as you watch your classmates meet horrifying ends based on the decisions that you make. It's a great visual novel and one that somehow scares you more than your traditional jump scare with just the way the story is told to you. Seriously, trigger warning for anybody that's considering playing this game, but at the same time, if you love J-horror, then I highly recommend this game for sure. Number 3, Siren, also known as Forbidden Siren. This game follows a group of characters that all find themselves trapped inside of a Japanese village in which the villagers have changed into Shibito, which are essentially zombies except that they still retain their intelligence and personality. Each playable character has their own story and journey throughout the village, and they are all there for different reasons, but while the game is pretty terrifying due to the setting and the Shibito roaming around the village, the true MVP of this game is the mechanic known as sightjacking. This is an ability that all of the playable characters share in which they are able to see through the eyes of the Shibito nearby. While this ability provides a strategic advantage against your enemies as it allows you to avoid them before they spot you, it also creates some of the most tense and terrifying sequences, as sometimes you'll be looking at a character that you're playing as confirming that the Shibito is already aware of where you are, and man, that's one of the most terrifying situations to be in, just saying. Number 2, Silent Hill F. The game that really inspired me to make this list is actually Silent Hill F. After playing through the entire game, it got me thinking, there's not really a lot of true J-horror games out there. You know, horror games developed by Japanese studios that are also set in Japan. Well, thankfully, Silent Hill F scratches that itch, and hopefully the success of this game will bring the subgenre front and center for other studios to take their shot at it as well. Anyway, Silent Hill F follows a young schoolgirl, Hanako, who finds her rural town full of monsters that appeared to arrive after a thick fog came in. The game is set in the 1960s, and the aesthetic, set pieces, and atmospheres are just out of this world impressive. In fact, I would argue that the Japanese inspirations and world building is exactly what I love the most about this game. Sure, the combat isn't exactly the smoothest in the Silent Hill series, but once you get past that and focus on the Japanese horror story that's told in this game, then I promise you, if you're a fan of J-horror, this game was made for you. Still hanging on to the title of best J-horror game of all time 2 decades later is Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterfly. I mean, I don't know if there will ever be a J-horror game better than Fatal Frame 2. From the gameplay side of things, you have traditional survival horror mechanics combined with a camera mechanic that forces you to face the terrifying ghosts you come across head on. From a setting point of view, you find yourself trapped inside of a rural Japanese village full of ghosts around every single corner, complete with the beautiful yet haunting setting of Minakami Village. The Fatal Frame series, especially the first 3 entries of the franchise, feels like traditional Japanese horror films like Ju-On and Ringu. That's how sinister, dark, and terrifying these disturbing stories are in this franchise, and Fatal Frame 2 is the peak of the franchise in all of those departments. I love Fatal Frame 2, and honestly, it's one of my favorite survival horror games of all time. So with that in mind, of course it's the best J-horror game of all time, and I can't wait to get my hands on the remake of it, which was just recently announced. Well, second remake, I guess, because, you know, technically we already got a remake, but yeah, you know what I mean. Well, that does it for this episode of Nerdspace Games. Hit up the comments and let me know what you think of my list. Is Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterfly the best J-horror game of all time, or is there a different game that deserves that title? Let me know down below. Anyway, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more survival horror content. Also, leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. But thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerdspace Games. Take care.